Hi folks, today I'm going to show you how I painted the Summer Birch Dryad from my Sylvaneth army. Alright, so I went ahead and I primed this in white. I really wanted the colors to pop, and because I'm doing a lighter color wood, I decided to prime in white. Just used a spray primer. I'm doing the base coat in Steel Legion Drab. This is a nice, light, kind of grayish brown color. I figured it would be a good color for the base coat of the birch. I've seen a lot of birch dryads, but they've usually been fall or winter themed, and I liked the idea of having this lighter color wood really pop against a really strong, bright green of the leaves. Alright, so there you can see the fully based in Dryad. There are a couple of spots like the leaves that I didn't worry about making sure I got full coverage because I'm going to go back over that. Alright, so now I'm doing a dry brush in Karak Stone. There you go, you can see it. A lot of this is dry brushing. That's kind of how I like to do wood. I think it gives it a really nice, kind of natural looking feel. And then I'll go back through and do some selective highlights to really make certain bits of it pop. But this also makes it a lot faster to do lots of dryads because you don't have to be as precise or worry about taking as much time with dry brushing as you do with doing some more just edge highlighting and stuff like that. So I'm just making sure to get all over it. I'm not worried about getting the dry brush on that skirt tunic loincloth part because I'm going to go ahead and go back through and paint that a different color later on. So there you can see the first coat of that dry brush, really starting to make some of the sculpt kind of pop out and lighten up that color while still having that kind of brown barky effect. Alright, now I'm going through with Agrax Earthshade to deepen those recesses, and looking at birch trees, they do have the very light colored, almost white bark, but you do see the kind of cracks in the bark and you see that darker wood underneath, or at least that's what I remember. So I'm going through and trying to pull this in, trying to make sure I don't go too heavy in spaces. If I get a little bit too much, I'll kind of dry off my brush a little bit and then go back in, because that kind of sucks back up some of the shade. Now you'll notice that I did not put shade on the hands or the tree. Because this was a summer theme, I wanted to have kind of that newer wood look, that greeny tones for some of the model, so I decided to do the hands and the branches coming out of the back with this green, so I'm using Athonian Camoshade as the shading for these bits. I think this is a nice way to add a little bit more contrast, make the model kind of stand out a little bit, so it's not just fully brown all over. So there you can see all of the shade dried, and you can really see the difference doing that camo shade kind of makes some of those the hands and the hair stand out from the rest of the body. All right, now I'm going through with Pallid Wych Flesh, and I'm doing another dry brush. I'm using a smaller dry brush here, not the makeup brush that I normally use, just so I can be a little bit more precise. So this is, I'm going through and really trying to be precise of where I'm putting this dry brush, bringing out the bark aspect of the birch tree, and especially really concentrating it on like the face, the chest, the hands, the features I really want to kind of pop a little bit more on this miniature. So there you can see I've gone through, and there is the fully dry brushed mini. So again, that's bringing it back to that lighter shade. Now I'm going through with a second coat of Pallid Wych Flesh. After the first coat fully dried, that's one important thing when you're dry brushing, is you have to let it dry. I know sometimes for those of you like me who can get a little impatient painting minis, it can be hard to let those dry. One suggestion I have is to be working on multiple minis. So I had about 4 of these guys that I was all working on at the same time. So kind of I set down one, moved through the next 3, and usually by that point, the first one would be dry enough I could go back to working on it. Another suggestion is to kind of go through and dry brush and then step away and do a quick chore and come back and do some more. All right, so there you can see those 2 coats of dry brush, and I think that's really starting to bring out some contrast with the mini. So with the dry brush, I kind of lost a little bit of the green, so I'm going back through with the Athonian Camoshade, hope I'm saying that right, and just being very precise on where I put this. I'm not doing very heavy coat, but just to kind of really help bring out that green bit. And because I have such a light color here, it really kind of picks it up quite a bit. So you can see the difference that that second coat of that shade makes. Okay, so now I'm going through and painting that skirt part with Formula P3 Idrian Flesh. I wanted to use a little bit of a warmer, deeper brown here to contrast with the rest of the mini. Since the dryads tend to be, there's not a whole lot of different parts to them, they can kind of look like just a brown blob. So trying to use different shades of brown on these different parts I found useful to make them stand out a little bit more. And here I am going through, being a little bit more careful where exactly I put the color, since I don't want to have to redo that dry brushing. And now I'm going back through with the Pallid Witch Flesh while I'm waiting for that skirt to dry enough to do some edge highlighting, and I'm doing some edge highlighting on the body, the face specifically, and I'll go through and do some on the body. Really like to focus on the face with this to really make that pop out, and then I go through and do like, okay, I did the collarbones here and the tops of the chest to make that, just pull it out a little bit more. You get a little bit more of that whiter shade to up the contrast between that and the other shades that you've dry brushed underneath it. So yeah, I'm doing kind of all of the top bits. So I'm doing the top of the thigh, I'll go through and do the arms, some of the branches, and some of the bits on the back, just the especially raised bits. Okay, so now I'm going through with Agrax Earthshade just to bring a little bit more dimension to that skirt. Not spending a whole lot of time on this skirt, just because there's so much going on with the rest of it that I didn't really feel like I needed to do a lot of layers with this skirt, and just adding that shade kind of helped give it a little bit more dimension. There you can see that is dried. I don't know why, but my Agrax Earthshade has a little bit of a shine to it. It's not the gloss formula, but whatever. So now I'm going through with the dry Sylvaneth Bark to do some little bit of edge highlighting. I know this is meant for dry brush, but I've occasionally used it for things it's not quite intended for. And that's something you don't have to necessarily always use the paint as it's intended. You can water down bases to be a little bit more of shades, stuff like that. Okay, so now I'm going through with Mephiston Red, and I'm painting the eyes. Most of the rest of the dryads that I have all have red eyes, so I figured I'd keep up that theme. Plus it adds a nice little pop to contrast with the white and green. So I'm being very careful, kind of getting the tip of my brush at one corner and pulling it in to the center. And there you can see. So now I'm going back in with Evil Sunz Scarlet, just in the very center of the eye to add a little bit of dimension. This is something that you're probably not going to see unless you get really up close with the mini, but I like to do that. Now for the leaves. So I wanted a super bright, summery green, so I'm using Warpstone Glow to kind of base in the leaves. I have the paint on my brush probably a little thicker than I normally would. I find that having the paint on the brush a little bit thicker works better for leaves because it gets the edges a little bit easier. I can kind of use that glob of paint and then move it around once I get it on the leaf. Because those bits kind of do stick out a little bit more, I'm not as worried about it spreading. So yeah, if you're saying, oh my gosh, water down your paint, I'm purposely doing it heavier for these. There you can see I've gone through and painted all of the leaves, top and bottom. I've gotten the leaves kind of coming up the leg as well. Now I'm going through with Moot Green, and I'm getting this along the edge of the leaf and pulling it up. So I'm leaving that center bit dark green. That adds a nice dimension to the leaf. It kind of has that vein, that center vein look to it, and I think it really makes these leaves pop out and seem super vibrant, so that adds some nice color to an otherwise brown mini. And just with this, go through, take your time, and we'll go through and paint all of the leaves. So there you can see it really makes those leaves pop and give them a little bit more shape. I'm pretty proud about this, and now we'll go to the finished photos. There you can see that is a summer themed, I guess you could also say it could be spring, Birch Dryad for your Sylvaneth army. You could also use this tutorial for any kind of tree-related monster or miniature, for if you want to do a birch or lighter color wood mini. Thanks so much for watching. We make videos here every Tuesday and Thursday. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of those videos. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you like and go ahead and share it with other folks who are working on their Sylvaneth minis or looking for some wood-themed painting tutorials. So what do you want to see next from me? I've got a couple more Sylvaneth models I need to paint up. Let me know in the comments below. Would you like to see hunters or tree lord? Let me know. A big thanks to our patrons, especially Lainey. If you want to support our channel, you can head over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye.